For us, it was just an opportunity to be with each other. But as my mother talked about it, as my father talked about it, it was the first time in their real life as a marital union that they had time for themselves.
Malcolm offered to bring Cassius Clay into the Nation of Islam in exchange for his own reinstatement. But the nation's hierarchy ignored Malcolm's offer. Like most of America, they saw the young boxer as a loudmouth with little chance of beating Liston.
Sonny has a big mouth below his left eye.
As Malcolm watched from ringside, the young Clay wore down the older champion. At the beginning of the 7th round, a battered Liston could not come out of his corner. Clay had become the new heavyweight champion of the world.
Now, give us that poetry on number 7. He wanted to go to heaven, so I took him in 7. You took him in 7. I am the king of the world. Hold it. I'm pretty. Hold it. You're not that pretty. I'm a bad man. Wait. I shook up the world.
What do you think of Cassius's victory in Miami?
I think it was a great victory. He proved he was the best man.
And where were you during the fight?
I was in the auditorium watching the fight.
Right at ringside?
Right at ringside. I was in seat 7.
The nation's leadership bypassed Malcolm and called Clay directly. They accepted the young champion into the Nation of Islam and announced his new name, Muhammad Ali, at their annual convention on Savior's Day. Malcolm was not invited. In his place, introducing Elijah Muhammad, was Malcolm's former protege, the minister from Boston, Louis X.
Minister Malcolm was honest. He was sincere. He was dedicated to the uplifting of African-American people. Then you had another group of people who were officials there in Chicago who were dedicated to the uplifting of themselves. He accused them of taking money, of buying expensive jewelry, of buying furs. He accused them of converting the Nation of Islam into a criminal organization.
A lot of the well-placed people in Islam had been trained by Malcolm. Some of them had been reformed by Malcolm. They liked their little petty power positions, and there were other people in the nation with aspiration toward that #1 slot. And if Elijah Muhammad died and if Malcolm X took over the nation, the first thing he might do was some serious house cleaning. He would move the money changers out of the temple. So the idea was to get rid of him before the event of the passing of the old man.
On March 8, 1964, Malcolm announced he was leaving the Nation of Islam. He formed a new religious organization called the Muslim Mosque Incorporated for those who followed him out of the nation. But Malcolm knew that a rival mosque would be seen as a direct challenge to Elijah Muhammad.
And he comes into this very room, and he sits there, and we talk to him. He says, first of all, that he had arrived early, but because he was ahead of time, he'd driven around the block a couple of times. He wanted to be exactly on time, and he was. We sat and listened. We didn't have any questions. We knew what the anguish was. We knew what was happening. And he just seemed to need a friendly ear. So we let him talk. And he talked about his time in prison. He talked about the times when he first heard of Elijah Muhammad and the change it made in his life. He expressed that deep hurt within him that his father had rejected him. And as he sat there, it was evident that if Elijah Muhammad had just done that, at that moment, whatever the differences were between them, Malcolm would have been off and running.
Malcolm was certainly a beloved son of the Harlem community, and people were interested in his side of the story. Elijah Muhammad was somebody in a picture on the wall, someone whose name was mentioned, but Harlem didn't know him. They knew Malcolm and loved Malcolm and remained loyal to Malcolm long after that split.
So what you and I have got to do is get involved. You and I have to be right there breathing down their throat. Every time they look over their shoulder, we want them to see us. We want to make them pass the strongest civil rights bill they've ever passed. Because we know even after they pass it, they can't enforce it. In order to do this, we're starting a voters registration drive. We have to get everybody in Harlem registered, not as Democrats or Republicans, but registered as independents. If you don't have the sense of responsibility to get registered, we'll move you out of town.
Malcolm called for an aggressive plan, not only to gain political power, but to move black people towards total control of their community.
It's going to be the ballot or the bullet.
Other ethnic groups, other ethnic and racial groups come into our community and own the stores. They run the schools. They run the supermarkets. They own the movie theaters. They own the almost anything in the community that is generating income is owned by outsiders.
My personal economic philosophy is also black nationalism, which means that the black man should have a hand in controlling the economy of the so-called Negro community. He should be developing the type of knowledge that will enable him to own and operate the businesses and thereby be able to create employment for his own people, for his own kind. And the social philosophy also is black nationalism, which means that instead of the black man trying to force himself into the society of the white man, we should be trying to eliminate from our own society the ills and the defects and make ourselves likable and sociable among our own kind.
Malcolm's whole agenda was different. He was about total independence. He was about self-determination, self-reliance, self-defense when necessary. And, of course, he was still fighting for the same thing that the others were, for justice. And so I felt Malcolm is a person I want to follow.
The growing popularity of Malcolm's new movement challenged those who remained loyal to Elijah Muhammad.
I didn't feel that I would have been a very good believer in Islam if I had just, because my own brother had left or whatever he had done, that I would leave. I wasn't that kind of a follower. Yeah, I would never have tried to coax Malcolm back. But at the same time, I would have gone on teaching because I was cleaning people up and I was making people that were indecent, decent, and I liked that.
Now at this time, Minister Philbrick. Ordinarily, I would not suggest the airing of differences between brothers to outsiders, and especially over a news media. But because of the grave consequences of recent events, I submit to this medium. Because I, Philbert X, a minister of Muhammad's Mosque of Lansing, Grand Rapids, Flint, and Muskegon, Michigan, love Islam, our teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and all of his followers, I think someone should say something to speak out against the acts of my blood brother Malcolm.
The purpose of making that statement was to fortify the Muslims. So I wanted to talk to the Muslims for the point, and that's why I was brought to Chicago, to make a statement that was strength.